Hi, everyone. Get ready for the How I Raised It podcast, the show where you get an inside, unfiltered look at how real entrepreneurs raised capital for their businesses. We'll listen to their stories, their successes, and the challenges they had to overcome to get to where they are now. I'm your host, Nathan Beckard, and thank you for tuning in to today's episode with Lindsay Tjepkema of Casted, a startup making podcast solutions for the enterprise. Pretty interesting business. If you are tuning into this podcast to learn how to raise capital for your business, I've created a super valuable free welcome pack for you. It includes a list of 2,500 investors who don't require a warm intro, plus 200 of the most important questions that serious investors are going to ask you. So this will help you get really prepared so you can totally crush your fundraise. To get this pack, please click the link in the first comment below, and you will be truly ready to pitch your startup with confidence. Last but not least, if you enjoy this conversation and think someone else would too, please share it with them and then hit that subscribe button to get the latest episodes. Very much appreciate that.
Welcome to How I Raised It, the podcast that goes behind the scenes with entrepreneurs who've raised capital. We uncover the tips, tricks, and techniques they use to get investors to write a check. Strap in and turn it up.
Hi, welcome to another episode of How I Raised It, produced by Foundersuite.com. Today I have Lindsay Tjepkema of Casted coming to us from Indianapolis. How's your day going?
Great. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Happy to have this conversation.
Great. How's the scene in Indianapolis these days? Are things getting under control with COVID? And
I think so. Everybody's kind of got their second shot glow, right? Everybody's excited, and I think as a result, we're starting to see a little bit more openness to things being open. So it's good. I think we can start to see the other side. I hope. I really hope.
Yeah, I know. Fingers crossed. Knock on wood. We got the email yesterday from the California, I guess, CDC or government about now outside you can take your mask off when you're out running or exercising or walking, and that's kind of like a big deal, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
little steps.
Makes us appreciate those little things so much more. So much more. Yeah.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, let's jump into it. What is Casted? What do you guys do?
Yeah. So we exist to make it possible for enterprise marketing teams to embrace the power of audio and video content, much like this, as not only as just something they should do as part of their content strategy, but really as the center point. So go have a great conversation like we're doing today. Yes, use that for a great podcast. Yes, use that for a great video content. But then what else are you going to do with it? How do you ring it out across all the other channels? How do you use it to fuel your blog and your social and to equip your sales team? And then how can you measure it in a way that truly matters to the business? How's it impacting revenue? How's it impacting pipeline? That's what we do. That's where Casted lives.
It sounds great. So, enterprise company comes on, they sign on, and now are they hosting, running, and distributing podcasts all through Casted, or what's the actual
Yeah. Where do we fit? So our customers go and create the content on their own. So they go, record in Zoom, wherever else they might want to get it produced. Sometimes they do that in-house. Sometimes they have a production agency or a marketing agency that creates the show. Once you have that final file, really, that audio or video content, that's where Casted comes into play. So yeah, you upload it into Casted, we host it, syndicate it, push it out to Apple, Spotify, YouTube. And then, everything else happens from there. We give you a microsite, a place for the show to live, metrics that, as I mentioned, that matter to the business, integrations with things like HubSpot, Marketo, Pardot, WordPress, so that you can really get more out of that content and measure its effectiveness.
Very interesting. So what are you seeing kind of like best practices or that enterprises are doing, right? You've obviously got to start with a good show, but then once you've got a good show, what are some of the, the magic happening?
Yeah, I think it truly is kind of two things. One, the brands that are getting creative and especially now realizing that audiences crave connection and a human element to the brand. It's regardless of what your product is, what your service is that you're selling, it's humans appealing to humans. And right. So that the companies, regardless of how big they are or what they're selling, that are getting really creative, in and around what they do and really appealing to their audience, they're winning. Those are best practices. I would say try things, get creative. And then 2, those that are saying, okay, yes, we're going to create that really great content, but we're going to, as I mentioned before, do more with it. That's a starting point. We're going to create this really engaging, rich multimedia content, but then we're going to mine it to do so much more. We're going to use that to fuel all of our other channels so that it all works together. Yeah. And anytime you're consuming any one piece of content, there's a way to dig deeper. So those are the ones that are seeing the best results.
That resonates. We started this podcast as a lark like 2 years ago, and then maybe a year into it, started taking some of the better episodes and like turning them into blog posts, and then even guest posting some articles from the content on TechCrunch and the Startup and Medium and places like that. And that's been kind of nice to get. So what other things are you seeing people do to sort of mine the content? Let's focus on that for a second.
Yeah. So I think, especially since a lot of people that are listening right now are founders. So it might be a team of one, it might be a very large, a scale up or growth mode company. And regardless of what stage you're at, and regardless of whether you're a fit for Casted or not, talking about what should you be doing with your content, everyone's strapped for time. Everyone's looking for ways to be more efficient. Yeah. And I would say, take that and have a conversation with, okay, who's your audience, right? So who are you doing your content for? Who are you trying to reach? And then simply kind of look at the other side and say, okay, who would they think is interesting? Who would they like to hear from? And in our company, partners of our company, customers of our company, people in the marketplace. And then let's literally have a conversation, right? So start there. And then once you have that, once you turn it into a podcast, once you turn it into video content, then kind of go back, listen through it. If you, like Casted does transcriptions, if you have the ability to do a transcript, do that, read through it and say, okay, what are some great tips? If it was a customer, did they share something that kind of makes us look good? Did they say, we've seen really great results with X, Y, and Z, even if they didn't call your company out by name, their results are your results. And you can say, this is our customer and they have really grown this way and we're happy to support them. If it's, an industry expert, if they're talking about something that really supports your greater good or your cause or your big why, use that, get that in the hands of your sales team, get that into your social media to really, it's third-party endorsement of what you're doing. And it's interesting, right? And then another thing is if you have an expert, again, that can be internal, external, coming on and talking about how to do something, why to do something. Can you go back and just turn that into blog content, article content, something that you mentioned, you did a lot of work that you would kind of get placements in TechCrunch and some of the industry pubs. How can you look at and say, okay, this person said these things that we can boil down and dig deeper and create some supplemental written content, quoting this person and really kind of blowing out, digging deeper into the details that they provided in that conversation. So there's lots of different ways. If you go capture a great conversation, capture that unique perspective and kind of original content, if you will, and just kind of go back and look for ways to repurpose it. And it's a lot more efficient, even if you don't have a whole lot of resources to throw at it.
What about, you also mentioned you guys at Casted have a measurement analytics angle. What are you seeing? This is a challenge, like speaking personally, like we're creating all this content, we're throwing it out there in the universe. I have very little insight as to how much of it trickles back into people subscribing for Foundersuite, right? Like almost zero visibility in that. So how are you seeing people sort of close that loop? Yeah.
So again, this is something that Casted does, but even if you're not trying to sell Casted, like regardless, if you're doing this kind of content, you should be trying to bring people back to your site, right? So Apple is great. Spotify is great. Use them. YouTube is great. YouTube is the second largest search engine behind Google. It's owned by Google, right? So definitely use them. Syndicate out to those things because it'll grow your audience and it gives people a chance to consume your content where it might be most convenient for them. But when you have a chance to promote your content, promote it on your site. Don't send people away to somewhere else. Send people to podcast or show or video at, yourcompany.com, your domain, because when they do, one, yes, of course you get more data. You can see where people are coming from. You can see where people are going to. You can see how people are clicking around, just like you do anywhere else on your own website. but you also get to control their experience a whole lot more. You get to
Mhm.
provide additional content. You get to provide, obviously it's branded. You get to have more influence over the customer experience or the listener experience, right? And then therefore, hopefully you can engage them even more. So they
Yeah.
get people kind of much more exposed to who you are and what you do, not just your great content, but also within the context of your brand.
Yeah, cool. Super helpful. One or two more questions, and we'll talk about fundraising, which is
Sure.
really what this is about. I could ask you a million questions about like podcasting best, so I'll try and
I'm here
limit
for
it.
it.
You mentioned like, one of the tips is making that human connection, and also you're seeing companies getting creative. Any good anecdotes of your customers that are getting creative? What are they doing?
Oh man, the first one that comes to mind, there's so many. There's a couple. So Zoom Info, we all know Zoom Info, right? They provide great data to companies that are looking for customers and looking for information about their audience, right? So you might think, man, how would they do a podcast? What would they even do a podcast about? Their data.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they have a podcast called Talk Data to Me.
Uh-huh.
Talk data to me. And they get really creative about how that data is being used. So they really tell the stories about kind of, it's like what happens next, right? So here's all this data, here's how it's being used. And that's the use case. That's literally what it's all about if you're Zoom Info. So that's really cool and creative. Something else that's a little bit more just kind of crafty, kind of doing whatever comes to mind. Terminus. So they're another one of our customers that they are just trying new things. They're having cool events, and it's not even all in and around podcasting and video, but they're doing, and they're kind of building in public too, as far as like they'll have an idea, they'll post on social about their idea, and then you'll see the idea come to light. So you're already kind of bought in on what they're doing, but check them out, especially so Jillian McNulty and Justin Keller over at Terminus. Check them out. You won't regret it. They're doing very cool things.
That does sound neat. All right, one sort of tangent question. You're focused on this. What do you think of sites like Clubhouse, and is this something that you'll absorb into your system, or is this a passing fad, or is this something that's standalone? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I love that people are embracing the importance of conversation and connection, especially over this last year. People need people. People want to talk to people. People want to listen in on conversations. And Clubhouse is live. Podcasts are sometimes live and recorded. And they all come back to people want to listen in on, and if they can be a part of conversations. It makes them feel connected, and connection is a basic human need. And so it pokes at this spot that we all have as people, that it's like, hey, here's an ability to be connected, to feel connected, to feel like you're part of something, to feel like you're part of like a group of people. And so I think from that matter, I mean, I love seeing people embrace Clubhouse, because again, it's just lifting up the importance of conversations. Now, what will happen to it? I don't know. I've been in a few. It can be really, really cool. It can be really fun. It can also be a little overwhelming, because it's like, okay, who's coming up next? What's happening? Where's this going? Yeah. But I think we'll see. I'm excited to see how it turns into, recording it or capturing what happens live, capturing what happens kind of organically, and then turning it into something, and how that might shape, for better or worse, how people act there. So I think one of it's interesting.
Are you seeing many of your enterprise customers interested in it, or not quite yet? Like, are they embracing it?
I think so. It depends. I think generally speaking, of course, there's some that have like they've dove in head first, and others are like, I don't know. But I think generally speaking, people are curious, and at least kind of letting their teams kind of poke around at it and see what's happening. So we'll see.
Cool. All right. Excellent. So let's talk about raising capital. How much have you guys raised, and over how many rounds?
Yeah. So we are, just shy of 10 million at this point. We had a seed round that we closed back in January 2020. Turned out to be very good timing for us. And then we just closed our Series A, $7 million round. We closed it in March and announced it in April.
Let's go to seed. How did you raise that? Was that angels? Was that local Indianapolis investors? What?
Yeah, so it was led by High Alpha and Elevate Ventures, which is all here in Indianapolis, just kind of by chance. We actually kind of rewinding from there, we grew out of High Alpha Venture Studios.
Okay.
So we're a studio company, spun out of that. High Alpha came in, they were excited about our growth, and co-led that round with Elevate Ventures, which also, as I mentioned, happens to be in Indianapolis. And then Tappan Hill Ventures, which is in Michigan. And then we had some wonderful angel investors join in on that. And that made up our seed round. Yeah.
Let's unpack that a little bit. The venture studio model. So what does that mean? Were you guys sort of incubate? Did you come up with this idea? Or did High Alpha people and they brought you into like run with it? Or how's that work?
Yeah, a little bit of both. And it's every story that comes out of that studio in particular is a little bit different. But for me, Scott Dorsey was one of the partners at High Alpha, reached out to me because they do something called a sprint week. So, a few times a year, their whole team gets together and kind of pokes at some ideas and decides how many, if any, they're going to try to lean into. For Casted, before it was even called Casted, there was this notion around like, hey, there might be something in and around B2B podcasting. Let's explore that. And so Scott reached out to me, and because I, at the time, was leading a content strategy team at this global enterprise, literally like across the street. And so he reached out and said, hey, I'd love, this is what we're doing over here. I'd love to talk with you. I'd love to pick your brain about B2B podcasting. And so we met, and I was like, look, it's not just about B2B podcasting. It's about content strategy moving forward. And again, that conversation led to, yes, this is a thing and I would love to do it. So yeah, we got started as part of the studio, grew it from there, brought in a couple co-founders, grew the team. Yeah. The rest
Interesting. I'm familiar with the venture studio, but haven't talked about it too much on the show. So they have this Alpha Week where they're sort of hatching ideas. Is that kind of the genesis?
Yep. They call it Sprint Week. And they take, and I wasn't part of it, so I can't speak to it directly, but just kind of speaking of what I know about it. Yeah. They put all of their collective heads together from very different parts of their own business. And like I said, kind of poke at ideas over the course of a very short period of time, just a few days, and decide what they're going to lean into and what they're going to pursue and what they're going to try to grow in the studio.
Interesting. So Sprint Week leads to this idea sort of attractive, right? They bring you over across the street, and then they sort of spin this out, and then they seed it with how much money, or is it sort of like a proof, get to market with a proof of concept, or what happened?
Yep. That's basically what happens, and that got us enough to get started. I brought in, so I got started, brought in a couple of co-founders. We started building the product and got our earliest customers, got some traction, and it gave us enough, again, just to get started, to get rolling. And we had some customers and some revenue before we went to raise our seed round, it was some great momentum very, very early. Yeah.
Can you share how much that was, that sort of MVP phase or whatever?
Yeah, I'd rather not get into the details, but yeah, it was enough to kind of get up and get started before it was just a small but significant amount to be able to get rolling at super early and get us to the point where we could go raise a nice, strong seed round.
So you get some customers, you have some momentum, and then how'd you kind of put together the seed round? People you knew, people High Alpha knew, what?
Yeah, so it's one of the beautiful things about the studio model is that you're surrounded from day one by really, really incredible people who have done this. And this means, they've run the finance side of a startup. They've helped with, recruitment side of the startup. They've, partners like Scott that have literally built companies before, that you're kind of leading you along the way. And so, yeah, and then they were also able to make some really great introductions to, VCs and to investors. So using some of the, for us, building a brand from day one, for me as a marketer, was really, really important. And so being able to use some of that momentum that we're seeing in the marketplace, along with some really great introductions from those who had already literally invested in us and kind of worked on building us to where we were, was really, really helpful. And so then we went into, full on pitching and raising the round, just like I'm sure you can imagine.
And did you stay focused only on Indianapolis investors? And
Nope.
No.
Nope. That's just ended up being the way it came together. At that point we could actually travel. And so I made some trips.
Right.
Yep.
January,
And yes. Yes. I was raising, leading up to January. And so, yeah, it seems like a a million years ago, but yeah, got on a plane a few times, and that's just where it shook out, which was nice, especially at that stage in the company, having everybody, the team in Indy, our investors in Indy, or at least Midwest. Yeah, it was good. Just the way it worked out.
Are there, maybe you don't know an exact number, but how many VCs are in Indianapolis? Like, do you have any rough sense?
I don't. A nice handful. I mean, there's more here than I think people probably realize. And there's, I think for good reason, there's a lot of talent here, especially in and around SaaS, but certainly not limited to. And so, yeah, there are lots, there's no shortage of investors to support the growth that's here. And then also to come from here and invest, in other areas too.
Yeah.
So,
how many investors do you think you talked to overall for that seed round?
For the seed round? Oh man. Somewhere between 50 and 100. We'll say 75. Yeah.
Yeah.
Including, angels and, people that from the very beginning, weren't a fit, and those that could have been. But to me, as with anything, whether it's raising capital or bringing in customers or just building your network, I mean, the more conversations, without getting to the point where literally that's all you're doing, you're not growing the business. But if you can find a balance of having great conversations, building your network, having more people know who you are, what you're doing, how passionate you are about what you're doing, the successes you have, the better. And I getting into the Series A, even those that passed on the seed round and still were not going to be a fit for Series A, maybe they were only seed or something like, or pre-seed funds, would come back out and be like, hey, I need you to, here's somebody that you should meet. I've been following your growth. Congratulations. And so those, I have found casting a wide net is always a good idea, and it's almost always worth the time. Always.
How'd you identify the right targets for your net? Right? I mean, there have been some funded podcast related companies, but I guess how are you sort of identifying the right people to talk to? I
think honestly for the seed round, I mean, I was learning so much. Like first time founder, first time CEO. I was literally having all the conversations I could. Yep. Learned a lot, and I was like, wow, this is a fund that typically only invests in Series B. Yep. And we are seed round. So this, does this make a whole lot of sense? And so I learned a lot. Now going into Series A, I had a network now, which I didn't before. I had people that I knew from the last round. And then also I would recommend, things like Crunchbase are really great, because then you can sort by what stage investors, angels and VCs alike invest in, what sectors, what geographies, and kind of it really narrowed it down. And then when I would get somebody reaching out to me or the potential for an introduction, or I was just looking to build a list of people that I wanted to talk to, I could at least narrow it down and say, okay, for some reason, this sounds really great, or I have a connection to this person or this fund, but they're probably not a fit. So at least I can go in with that frame of mind and work really hard to build a great relationship, but know where it's probably going to go, versus this one would be a really great fit. And it's up to me to convince them, to agree with me, to see that too. Yeah.
So let's talk about Series A now. So ultimately this was led by Revolution, which is, they're very active, aren't they? They've come up a bunch on this show.
They've been great so far. They've been great. Very, very lucky to be working with them.
So maybe, you sort of mentioned this a minute ago. You kind of built a network raising the seed, and then how did you translate it into Series A? And also same questions, how many investors did you talk to? Any other like anecdotes from that?
Sure.
Using that round. Yeah.
Again, still casting a wide net. I kept a very sophisticated spreadsheet of meaning list of people that I talked to last time around, whatever notes that I had. I thanked past Lindsay as I was going to raise Series A, because I had notes like, follow up at Series A, would be interested in Series A. Now, were they always interested, or was that just an easy way to say no? I don't know, but I reminded them that, hey, like you said, you wanted to follow up at Series A, here we are. And I also, here's something that I think is really obvious, but important to throw out there, is that when you're between rounds, like cultivating those relationships is really important, because there were some people that were cheering us on, and literally I would send, our updates and, hey, we just closed this big customer and we just hit this milestone. And then when it came time, even if they weren't a fit, even if, it didn't work out, for whatever reason, they were cheering us on and they were excited to make introductions for us. So again, casting a wide net, going back to my notes, getting into Crunchbase, and then asking other people like, hey, do you know someone here? And just asking for intros. And
Yeah. Good. And was this Revolution led the whole round, or was this a party round or
Yep. Yeah. So they led, and then High Alpha, Elevate, and Tappan Hill all returned, which was really great. Most of our insiders returned, and we also had a couple of wonderful angels join, including Joanne Bradford and Gina Bianchini, who are just incredible leaders in SaaS and in the space. And so I personally am just very happy to have them on board too. So it was a great round.
Awesome. Very good. Can you share anything? You don't have to give exact numbers, but it sounds like things were growing pretty quickly. One of the questions always comes up, like, what were the investors investing in? Was it the growth? Was it this big vision you're painting? Was it a bunch of other stuff? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think what it came down to for us was the opportunity to create something big, right? And so, we're creating a category. We're not the better, cheaper, faster version of something else. We're saying, hey, here's the next generation of content marketing, and here's where it starts, and this, Casted is where it begins. And I think with anyone else who's a founder who's creating a category can relate. Some people say, I don't get it. All right. Or that's a really great idea. I love your idea, but I don't think the market's going to be there. But then there are a few that are going to say, I get it. I see it. And you're the ones to do it. And so I think at the end of the day, it was casting a vision, explaining why I am so convicted that it's going to happen and that we are the ones to do it. Period. And just finding that alignment. And then being able to have the numbers to prove it, as far as like, and this is the traction that we're already seeing. This is when we're going to reach these significant milestones. And this is the big opportunity. And some will buy it, and some literally will invest in it, and others just won't. So
it's really good. If you're willing to share, what's sort of the vision that you're projecting out there, or about where this is all going?
Yeah, I think super big picture is, I've been in marketing for 15 years. I kind of grew up with content marketing. Remember when it was a brand new idea all the way to now it's really pretty outdated. All of us that have been in it for a while have seen that your blog really is the center. It's really your most valuable asset to your marketing strategy. And that's great. Blogging is great. Search engine optimization is great. But when it is at the cost of your audience, when you're prioritizing algorithms over your audience, that's a problem. And that's become the strategy for a lot of companies. And it really kind of best practices across the industry in many ways, not for all, but some. And so what we're saying is, what if there's a better way? Next generation of content marketing and content strategy says, go have a great conversation, prioritize your audience over the algorithms, create really creative, engaging content first, and then ring it out to things like your blog to support your sales team across all of those channels, and then measure it in ways that don't just say, hey, this was great marketing, which is good, but also it impacted the business in this way. Your marketing team is actually making a difference as far as the revenue is concerned for this business. That's the next generation. And that's what we're building. That's what we're here to do.
Cool. All right. Well, one or two last questions, but this is the question I ask everyone, any bits of advice or tips we haven't covered, or any advice you would give your younger self if you are starting back at the High Alpha days, spitting out this thing? What would you tell your younger self?
Goodness. Just embrace it. I think the early days, which were not that long ago. I mean, our second birthday, our second birthday is literally tomorrow. So we're turning 2 tomorrow. But I think, those early days of uncertainty, and when things are unknown, it doesn't really change. And like, here I am, I'm 2 years into it. I don't know, somebody who's 10 years into it is like, what's she talking about? But that's the fun, right? That's literally the fun part, is learning and constantly being in a state of discomfort and finding your way through. And so I would just say, that's not a bad thing. Going back to myself, I'd say this is not a bad, this discomfort is good, and embrace it.
Excellent. Good. Cool. Well, this is great. If people want to learn more, casted.us. Okay, casted.us.
And you can find us on Twitter at GoCasted. You can find me at Casted Lindsay. And I'm sure you can guess we have a few podcasts for you to choose from if you want to listen to more.
Excellent. And anything you want to mention or promote, just other than maybe your own podcast, anything? How big you're targeting enterprise? So are SMBs or startups applicable?
Yeah. So mid-market to enterprise is our sweet spot. We do have a few, smaller companies, few, high growth startups that are prioritizing this type of content, that are prioritizing thought leadership and content marketing that we could be a good fit for. But yeah, basically, if you seek to understand how your thought leadership is actually making a difference for your revenue and how your audio and video content and conversations could help fuel that, it could be a good fit.
Cool. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much. Enjoy the Indianapolis spring. I'm sure is it nice there right now?
It is today. I mean, literally yesterday was Tuesday and it was 80 degrees. The Tuesday prior is when we got 4 inches of snow. So, it's fine. Who knows what tomorrow will bring?
Yeah. Cool.
So, yes.
All right, Lindsay, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we'll catch you after your Series B.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Bye.